I'm going to continue on God colored glasses. Now, God isn't a color, but there's an old saying, he or she sees the world through rose colored glasses, meaning that perspective creates a tint on what they see that alters their perspective and therefore their actions. That person might be perceived as unrealistic and fanciful, but nonetheless, they tend to see everything based on the perspective. I think we all have a set of glasses that is not visible, but is a defining factor in our perceptions and therefore actions. And it has been popping out of the Word of God that there are multiple examples where how we see God affects our actions and affects then how God judges our actions. I'm going to read a section that we all probably know. Um, the parable of the talents. For the kingdom of heaven is like a man traveling to a far country, who called his own servants and delivered his goods to them. And to one he gave 5 talents, to another 2, and to another 1, to each according to his own ability. And immediately he went on a journey. And then he who had received 5 talents went and traded with them, and made another 5 talents. And likewise he who had received 2 gained 2 more. But he who had received 1 went and dug in the ground, and hid his Lord's money. After a long time the Lord of those servants came and settled accounts with them. So he who had received 5 talents came and brought 5 other talents, saying, Lord, you delivered to me 5 talents. Look, I have gained 5 more talents beside them. His Lord said to him, Well done, good and faithful servant. You are faithful over a few things. I will make you ruler over many things. Enter into the joy of your Lord. He also, who had received 2 talents, came and said, Lord, you delivered to me 2 talents. Look, I have gained 2 more talents beside them. His Lord said to him, Well done, good and faithful servant. You have been faithful over a few things. I will make you ruler over many things. Enter into the joy of your Lord. He who had received the 1 talent came and said, Lord, I knew you were a hard man, reaping where you have not sown, and gathering where you have not scattered seed. I was afraid, and went and hid your talent in the ground. Lord, there you have what is yours. But his Lord answered and said to him, You wicked and lazy servant, you knew that I reap where I have not sown, and gather where I have not gathered seed. So you ought to have deposited my money with the bankers, and at my coming I would have received back my own with interest. So take the talent with him, and give it to him who has 10 talents. For to everyone who has, more will be given, and he will have abundance. But from him who does not have, even what he has will be taken from him. And cast the unprofitable servant into the outer darkness. There will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. Now, I hope that you have heard good teaching about the meaning of the parable of the talents. I don't want to go through the center point, the nucleus of this story. Rather, I want to talk about this God-colored glasses idea. So, in the most brief terms to analyze its meaning, believers are servants of a kingdom that is both within you and at hand and coming. So the kingdom is all those things. It's in a quantum state. It's in a kind of spiritual superposition. It is both within you, it is both arriving, it is a thing that we are awaiting in its fullness. We have a spiritual responsibility to take what Jesus has invested in us in this gospel age and to reinvest it for a future heavenly gain. The one-talent servant has spiritual treasure and does not reinvest, does not take what God has put in him. This is probably spiritual gifts, but it could be any resources God has given you. And he is questioned, why did you do this? And he says, now this is the center point of what I want to talk about, this idea of the glasses through which we view God and how it affects our thoughts and our actions and ultimately God's assessment of our behaviors. He says, God, you're hard. You're unfair, you're unjust, you're terrifying, you're somebody to hide from. That's his statement. This is his viewpoint on God. Now, in a moment, we're going to contrast that with the viewpoint of these faithful servants. When God answers, he does not deny the accusations. The servant accuses God. He says, you reap where you have not sown, you gather where you have not scattered seed. You're like a farmer that doesn't have to do the work. Just wave your hand and the trees and the corn and the, whatever it is you want, because your creator just pops up. It sounds like a very negative statement. The master, who is in this case Jesus, does not deny it, but says, if you knew those things about me, you should have at least invested, left it with usury. Now, usury is leaving your money with bankers to accrue interest, which, in my opinion, has to do with, so I don't know what my gifts are. I don't know how to invest them. And you let wiser people put you in positions of servanthood so that you can discover your gifts and even grow them, whether you know they are or not. That is not the central point. He was not even willing to do that very thing. I'm sure he was aware of that option. The others were aware of that option. They went and they were probably equivalently trained people whose actions were different, but whose level of responsibility was similar. The master calls him wicked and lazy. Now, we can make a contrast here. The faithful servants knew that God reaped where he had not sown. The master reaped where he had not sown. They knew that the master can gather seeds that have not been scattered. And yet they continue to see him as just, as fair. So, the statement exists on its own. God is all-powerful, does not need us for the gospel, does not need us for the expansion of his kingdom. He uses us anyway. God needs nothing from me, needs nothing from you, but he wants us involved. And these righteous servants, they say, we're going to invest what God put in us. And we see God as just. We see God as fair. We see him as someone to welcome. We see him as someone to honor, someone to revere. So they've taken the same information about the same master who they probably know in similar degrees from working for him. But their glasses are different in how they perceive the actions. Brothers and sisters, there are truths about God that we can allow ourselves to become snared in. That is our own judgment of them. Is it fair or not fair that God can make produce happen from the earth without our involvement? That a farmer has to toil throughout his life to make produce happen? That a wise investor of money has to study hard and take risk and be patient and stress through difficult times when they're analyzing financial things, and God can just snap his finger and make wealth occur. If you place yourself in a position to judge God's relative fairness, then you have missed the point. God defines justice, God defines fairness. We choose to see him in that way, or we can find innumerable reasons to get stuck in our own logic. That is the phrase that I find so disturbing, that I've analyzed it so many times it bothers me. How could a good God allow bad things to happen? You in those words have placed yourself in a position to judge the relative goodness of God, to define what goodness is, to define what a good God would or would not do, rather than allowing God to define what those things are. What is preventing you or me from investing the treasure God has invested in us in the present age? God calls this servant wicked, which is thinking, lazy, which is behavior. Laziness is just the lack of obedience to invest the treasure. The wicked is this mental thing he has going on, thinking he can judge his master, thinking that he's got a wicked master, an evil master, one who's unfair and unjust. And this is wicked thinking that creates the lazy action, that then creates the judgment and his ultimate separation. Could it be that you or I are seeing God through the wrong colored glasses?